Today, we're diving into a story that smashes history and theoretical physics together, and it all starts with one of the most incredible questions you could possibly ask. You know the one, right? We've all played that game. What if one tiny moment, a single choice, a split second of luck, had gone differently? Just how different would our world look today? Well, for a historian named Professor Guinday, this wasn't some fun thought experiment. No, this hypothetical question became his reality. He didn't just imagine another world, he actually lived in one. So, our story kicks off with a real mystery. Professor Gaitonde vanishes for 2 whole days, and when he's finally found, dazed in a park, the story he tells about where he's been, well, it sounds completely and utterly impossible. But here's the kicker. He has proof, real physical evidence. It's a torn page from a history book, a book that describes a key moment in Indian history, but gets the outcome totally wrong, a book that flat out shouldn't exist. This is his proof that he wasn't just dreaming. To figure out what this crazy page means, we have to go back with the professor. We have to retrace his steps during those 2 lost days. He tells us he found himself on a train heading to Bombay, a Bombay that looked familiar but felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. The first huge shocker hits him pretty much the second he steps off the train. See, in our history, the East India Company was shut down after 1857. But in the world he stumbled into, whoa, it was alive and well, with its headquarters standing right there in front of him. Clearly, history took a very, very different turn here. And the weird details just kept piling up. The trains had Greater Bombay Metropolitan Railway written on them, and every single carriage had a tiny Union Jack painted on it. The streets were filled with British shops and big, imposing banks. This wasn't just a hint of British influence. It was a loud, flashing neon sign that he was in British territory. But hold on, it's not what you think. As the professor dug deeper, he realized this India wasn't a colony. It was actually a proud, independent nation that had never been enslaved. They had a business deal with the British, sure, letting them operate out of Bombay, but it was a relationship between equals, which just makes the central question even bigger. What on earth changed? So, what does a good historian do when faced with a massive historical riddle? He hits the books, right? Professor Gaitonde heads straight to a library, determined to find the answer. And poring over their history books, he finds it. He pinpoints the exact moment where his world and our world split apart. He discovers the turning point. Up until the Third Battle of Panipat, everything was the same. History in both worlds was identical. But the outcome of that one battle, that was the fork in the road. That's where two totally different futures began. Okay, let's just lay this out side by side, because this is wild. In our world, the Maratha leader Vishwas Rao is hit by a bullet and killed. Morale just collapses, the army is destroyed, and this opens the door for the East India Company to take over. But in the world Gaitonde visited, that same bullet misses. Morale goes through the roof, the Marathas win the battle, and they become the supreme power, keeping the company on a very short leash. Think about that. One bullet, two completely different Indias. This is the actual text that Gaitonde found in that alternate history book. It describes that critical moment as an act of mercy from God, a near miss that changed the entire destiny of a nation. And now, look at this. This is the text from the exact same book in our reality. The wording is almost identical, but with one tiny, world-shattering change. Here, God expressed displeasure. The bullet finds its target. This single phrase is the dividing line between two realities. So Gaitonde gets back to his own time, his head spinning, holding this impossible piece of paper. He desperately needs an explanation. He goes to his friend, a scientist named Rajendra Deshpande, who suggests that maybe, just maybe, this isn't a history problem. Maybe it's a physics problem. Rajendra's first idea is something called catastrophe theory. Sounds dramatic, right? But the concept is actually pretty simple. Imagine you're cooling water, degree by degree. It's still liquid, until one final tiny change in temperature pushes it over a tipping point, and bam, it instantly becomes solid ice. So Rajendra applies this to history. He says the Battle of Panipat was a catastrophic event. The morale of the two armies was the system, teetering on a knife's edge, and the path of that one single bullet, that was the tiny little push that sent the whole thing tumbling down a completely different path. Okay, but that only explains how history could have split. It doesn't explain how Gaitonde actually went there. And this is where things get really mind-bending. For this, Rajender turns to quantum theory and the idea of many worlds. This theory suggests that reality isn't just one single story. At every moment of choice, reality splits, and all possible outcomes actually happen, just in their own separate parallel universes. So, how did the professor make the jump? Well, Rajendra's hypothesis goes like this. Right before Gaitonde had his accident, he was thinking really intensely about the Battle of Panipat and catastrophe theory. The collision with the truck provided a jolt, an interaction, and the specific thoughts firing in his brain acted like a trigger, causing his consciousness to literally jump the tracks from our world into another one. And let's be super clear about this. This wasn't time travel. Professor Gaitonde was always in the present day. He just happened to spend 2 of those days in a different present, a parallel reality that branched off from ours centuries ago. So whether you buy the whole quantum physics explanation or not, for Professor Gaitonde, the experience was 100% real, and it had a profound, permanent effect on him. Get this, throughout his long, distinguished career, the professor had chaired exactly 999 meetings. He was actually scheduled to give his 1000th presidential address, and the topic was going to be speculating on what might have happened at Panipat. After his adventure, he just canceled it. He didn't need to speculate anymore. He'd seen it. In fact, his trip ended when, in that other world, he tried to get on stage at a lecture and the crowd physically threw him out. And his conclusion is absolutely chilling. He believes that the version of himself who was on that stage is still there, lost in that other reality, and that our professor just took his place when he transitioned back. And that leaves us with one last, unsettling thought to chew on. If quantum mechanics says that every possibility creates a new world, and that maybe, just maybe, it's possible to cross between them, how can you ever be sure which version of reality you're actually living in?